Good morning, special families, and welcome to another episode of Thriving Special Families. I'm your host, Crystal Sanford, your autism and IEP advocate, and I'm so glad to be here this morning with Dr. Katherine McKernan. Hi, Katherine.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. I'm so excited about our topic today. So today we're going to talk about supporting social skills at home because where are we at home now? Maybe more than we expected to be. And if you're a parent like me with a child with unique needs, especially in the area of social skills, you may be seeing your child struggle right now. And so we have an expert who is awesome, and she is going to give us some tips to help our children thrive during this time. So again, this is Crystal Sanford with Thriving Special Families. I want to also share that the information that is presented here is a purpose to share information and experiences. It should not be construed as medical or any other type of legal advice. If you are looking for specific information for your situation, please do contact a specialist in that area. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Katherine. Dr. Katherine is an SLPD. She is a doctorate in speech pathology. She is a pediatric speech pathologist, and she has 10 years of experience specializing in autism and early intervention and speech sound disorders. Dr. Katherine is the president of North Star Speech and Language Pathology Center in San Diego, and she provides in-home and online speech therapy and parent coaching to families. So we are very excited to have you here, Dr. Katherine.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
So please tell us about yourself and really what brought you to the field of speech pathology and helping families, because I love people and I love to hear people's stories and what has connected you to the special needs community.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a pediatric speech language pathologist, and I was first exposed to speech language therapy actually when my middle sister received speech language therapy when we were kids. She had difficulty saying sounds.
Mhm.
So, I'm the oldest sister, so I kind of had this leadership type role in what we were doing. And I actually remember we would go and like observe her getting speech therapy, and that was the same clinic that I later got my bachelor's focused on speech language therapy at.
Wow,
So
that's
it
so
kind of came full
cool.
circle, which was
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And then I eventually got a doctorate from Northwestern University in speech language pathology. And through my work at Northwestern, we really talked about how adults learn. And that was a really big part of our course curriculum.
Mhm.
And what that cracked open for me was that, the research in the field of speech language pathology really focuses on training parents, coaching parents to support their children.
Mhm.
But if we're not doing it from a way of understanding the research behind adult learning, then we're kind of setting parents up for failure because we're trying to tell them what to do, but we're
Right.
not teaching it in a way where parents can be successful. And so that's where things really came together for my business that I started, North
Mhm.
Star. And so I do online and in-home speech language therapy in San Diego, and then online throughout California. And
Mhm.
my focus is really parent coaching. So using what I know about the research behind adult learning and applying that to help parents help their children.
That's really cool, and that's really unique, I want to say, to some of the others, not to discount any other speech pathology practices, but I like the fact that you do have that aspect of parent coaching. Parents are really valuable. I myself have been a speech pathologist for over 20 years, and I know that the parents who the children who do the best are the children who have parents who are involved. But how do you get parents involved? Well, they need to be educated in a way that they can understand so that they can be involved and help their child to make the best of their skills and what they're learning. So
Yeah,
kudos to you for bringing in the parents and using them really as the best advocate, as they are for their children.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, great. So, we're talking today about social skills, and we're talking about, and parents, if you're watching, feel free to know that you can ask your questions live, and we'll do our best to answer them. So add your questions in the comment, and also let us know where you're watching from as well. So go ahead and share that in the comments. So again, today we're talking about social skills, right? And so here we are in the time of distance learning and, COVID, quarantine and such things. And so our children who struggle socially, many of them are really not doing as well in that area, right? Certain things you just are harder to teach, right? In a time when you're doing it via teletherapy and such things. So, what would you describe as social skills? How does that play out at home?
So I think when parents traditionally think about language and communication skills, they usually think about how people understand language, which is
Mhm.
what's referred to as receptive language, and also how people use language, which is called expressive language. And so social language is how we bring receptive language and expressive language together and use
Mhm.
communication to connect with other people, which is really what language is for. So social communication differences can impact the way that a child thinks about others and relates to others and communicates with others.
Mhm.
So at home, it can make things really challenging,
Oh, yeah.
not only between the child and their parent, but child and siblings and peers. So I think there's kind of a misunderstanding when we think about like social skills and social communication.
Mhm.
I think traditionally there's a really big emphasis on eye contact, and I think we're kind
Mhm.
of missing the mark when we are getting like overly focused on eye contact because in
Hallelujah.
reality, yeah,
Let me say
eye
that.
contact doesn't tell you that much
Yeah.
about actually a child's attention or their social connection with another person.
Mhm.
Um, Eye contact is really cultural,
Mhm.
and,
For sure.
just because I'm looking away doesn't mean I'm not thinking about you.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean I'm
Mhm.
not thinking about the topic. So I think we're kind of, like I said, focused on the wrong thing um, at times. And so when it comes to social language, I think there's been this like emphasis on social skills training, particularly for autistic people, children and adults,
Mhm.
where we're kind of teaching them to pretend like the social language differences don't exist. And again, I think that's where we're missing the mark because it shouldn't be about like hiding your social language differences. It should be
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
giving skills to support more success in the face of those differences. So I think
That is so true.
that's the most important thing to work on is at home is not to think about like how can I make my child look less different because your child is different and that's okay. It's okay to be different.
Mhm.
Um, I when a parent of one of my patients last week said there's no such thing as like a cookie cutter human. We're all different.
That's
Um,
very true. That's a great
yeah,
that's a great way to look at it, and that's so true.
yeah.
And
So we just
and
want to
thank
help children be successful.
Yeah, thank you for validating that, right? Because I'm an autism parent, but it could be autism, it could be ADHD, it could be social anxiety, whatever. And your child may be struggling socially, and so the initial gut reaction might be to try to like make your child look like everybody else or be like everybody else, right? And you're going to be frustrated, and you're going to be frustrated with your child. I mean, that's just not. Um, it's not feasible, and it's not really the best use of our time, and it's not really putting the right focus, I think, on celebrating who your child is and who they are, strengths and challenges combined. And I think, like you said, if we can just focus on helping them to manage with the skill set that they're working with. I mean, hey, if you had a kid who didn't see well, you would help them get the right pair of glasses. Well, same thing here. You've got a child who struggles with social skills. Let's help them mold and shape what they do have, in a way that can help them be most successful.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Mm.
we're not looking at children with vision loss and trying to make them appear as though they don't have vision loss,
Right. Yeah.
right? We're
Mhm.
looking at a child with vision loss and we're saying like, okay, how can we support your vision to make you more
Mhm.
successful? And that's exactly what we should be doing for autistic children.
Yeah, that's
Is
wonderful.
we're not hiding the autism, but we're
Mhm.
helping the child be more successful.
That's
And
great.
and they have autism and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the root of it right there. They have
Mhm.
autism. That's okay. I was just responding to a parent's comment this morning, and she said, how do I have that discussion with my child? I think he's ready. He's 10. And I'm thinking, like, whew, he's 10. Maybe you could have maybe been thinking about that if you were in that space, a little bit earlier, but that's okay. I mean, and my explanation was, we started the conversation with my daughter that she was different, just that we all have differences. And so you have some differences. And so don't we all? And then when she was a little bit older, she was between like 7 and 8, we started calling that difference autism. And so it was just a thing. It was very matter of fact. You wear glasses and you have autism and you're, great at writing. I mean, so if we can get to that point, then it'll make all of the other parenting and pieces to the puzzle a little bit easier. If we can be okay in the root that, you're different, I'm different, and we're all different, and that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Let me get off my soapbox. But, um, because we could talk about that all day. But
That's the
anyway,
beauty of having your own show is it's your own little soapbox, right?
yeah, thank you, thank you. But in efforts to help and support other families who also
Yeah.
parent children with unique
Yes.
needs like autism, and social anxiety is another big piece that I'm helping to manage in one of my other child as well. And so talking about social skills and talking about beyond eye contact, right? What is a tip that you have for, let's say, parents of younger children, 0 to 5, who are struggling in the area of social skills right now in the middle of COVID, right?
Yeah. So, I think that this time has been really hard because, like you were saying, parents are spending more time with their children at home
Hmm.
because the
Hmm.
kids are doing distance learning,
Right.
or, they're not able to go to school in person. They're not able to go to daycare. So I've heard from a lot of parents that they're seeing difficulties and differences that they hadn't noticed before,
Hmm.
as well as in some cases, like a regression or lack of growth when it
Right.
comes to social language.
Hmm.
Um, because there aren't as many opportunities, and we learn what we're able to practice. So
So
if
true.
if kids aren't getting a chance to practice talking to other children and being with people outside of the home, then we'll see that in the way that they're growing and changing. So I've kind of gathered some top tips that I think can really be used with children of age. Um, my first one is goal setting. And this is like you were asking about, younger children, but you can use this with older kids as well. So when you're with your child at home, it's really important to set a goal. And I think that goal setting, I think it kind of gets a bad rap.
Hmm.
People like roll their eyes at setting goals and they're like, well, I have this in my head. This is what I want to do. But goal
Right.
setting is really important when it comes to actual behavior change, which is
Mm.
is what we're trying to create
Yeah.
when you're like, I want to help my child be more successful with this. We're creating behavior change in you as the parent,
Hmm.
and your behavior change helps to create behavior change in your child.
Yeah.
So kind of like changing what you're doing. So goal setting is going to be number one.
Mm.
For younger children, you might look at them and say, okay, I want my child to be more successful with sharing or turn taking or, whatever it is, and set that goal. But for older kids, it's going to be really important to bring kids into the goal setting process.
Mm.
So instead of, you're not going to look at a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old and set a goal for them, because that will never work.
Right.
Um,
For
we
sure.
need to bring these kids in and get them involved. And, even like a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, you can talk to them about, what they want to try to do, what they want to try to learn. So I think that's really important is, we need to get kids involved in what we're working on and, how we want to help them be more successful. We can't make kids do things that they don't want to do. We can't make anybody do something they don't want to do.
Right. Yeah, especially a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
But especially
So
a
goal
kid.
setting is important for that. Yeah,
Yeah,
especially a
yeah,
kid.
yeah, yeah. I just want to stop here and say again, for those who are just joining us, welcome to another episode of Thriving Special Families, where I'm your host, Crystal Sanford. Today we have Dr. Catherine here, and we're discussing how to support your child's social skills at home. I also want to thank our sponsors. We have the sponsor of Not Just for Nannies, a special caregiver manual. This caregiver manual is so valuable for families who have children with special needs, because you as a caregiver need time to be away from your family from time to time. How do you explain those special things and nuances about your family? Well, you use the Not Just for Nannies special caregivers manual. You're able to share special diets, favorite activities, all the things that are unique to your family, hand that over to your caregiver, and they are able to provide your child with the care that you need in your absence. So again, thank you to our sponsors, the Not Just for Nannies Caregiver Manual. So families, thank you again for watching. We want to let you know that you can add your questions to the comments here, and we'll do our best to answer them. Also, let us know where you're watching from. So, Dr. Catherine, you were sharing tips about how to support our children at home, right? And the first tip was setting goals and goal setting and getting our kids involved with that. And parents, if you have some questions for Dr. Catherine, please add those to the comment. What's another tip that you have for families right now who want to support their children in social skills?
So one of my favorite strategies is called SelfTalk. And the reason it's my favorite is because you can do it all day long,
Mhm.
just throughout your regular routine. It's not something where you're having to find time out of the busy day to do something extra,
Great. We
something you
need
can
that.
build in. Yeah. So to use self-talk, you talk about your thoughts and your feelings and your decisions all day long. And, we talked about setting a goal. And so you can tailor your self-talk towards the goal that you set for your child. So for example, if you want to help your child practice taking turns while you're playing a game as a family, the self-talk might sound like, I know it's my turn because your turn is over.
Mhm.
So you're just talking a lot about how you know that things are happening. And what
Mhm.
that does is it helps your child understand your internal dialogue, and it starts to help them develop their own internal dialogue for problem solving, decision making, thoughts and feelings. So it can
Mhm.
be a really, really powerful tool. Another
That
example might be,
I was gonna say that's so simple, yet so powerful, right? Because so many
mhm,
of our kids, they struggle to understand what is implicit, and we need to make it explicit for them, right? They don't just
yeah,
they don't just get it. They don't just pick it up naturally. If they could, they would have. And so we need to make it more explicit and obvious. And that's really great. I mean, for example, like you said, parents can do this all day long. If you're playing a game, like, wow, and I'll do this sometimes with my kids. I'll do like the opposite behavior and see what they'll say about it. Like, I am
mhm,
so upset. I lost this game. I don't want to play anymore. I'm so frustrated. And so I will say those things, and then they sometimes will be like, "Oh, it's okay, mom. You can have some water." Like that's
yeah.
such a powerful opportunity there to practice those skills right in everyday life.
Exactly. Well, and I think it's interesting what you said about being like implicit practice versus explicit,
Yeah.
because it is like explicitly teaching
Yep.
some of this perspective taking, like understanding what others are thinking and understanding
Mhm.
how to make decisions.
Mhm.
But it also is in practice because you're not saying like right now we're practicing turn taking and right now we're
Yes.
practicing perspective taking. So
Mhm.
that's another part of like why it's my favorite strategy, because your child doesn't know that they're learning in a
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah,
They
that's
don't
right.
recognize that it's teaching, so they're not
Mhm.
viewing it as like work time or it's just like
Mhm.
fun time with mom or dad.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you're bringing in all of this really important learning.
And that's important because sometimes for kiddos who have, they may be older and they are so done with therapy, or they have so many time hours or whatever opportunities with therapy. And so if you make it like therapy, they are out of there. They are going to check out. And so anytime that you can make it fun and natural, right? And I think that's where you're going to see the most carryover as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's huge what you say about carryover. And I think too, a lot of times I think our kids are really over programmed. And I think that that's been
Mhm.
kind of interesting with, the pandemic and distance learning, is that I think a lot of families have seen like a step back from like, okay, my kid no longer is, busy from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m.
Mhm.
We have some
Mhm.
time to spend time together as a family.
Right.
Maybe a little silver lining to all of this.
It depends on the day, let me tell you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It
For the
depends on the
time of
day.
day. Yeah, yeah.
But
Oh.
yeah, so I think it's important that like, like you said, you're practicing the skills outside of like traditional work
Mhm.
time.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that will help with your child being able to use the skills all the time as well.
So now what about our kiddos who are more significantly impacted? Let's say they're on the autism spectrum, but they're more significantly impacted maybe, or, Down syndrome, or intellectual disability, or such challenges. How are we going to practice social skills in a natural way with our children in this context?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much about finding what they enjoy.
Mm.
People learn best when we're doing what we enjoy, and we as adults can see that when we reflect on our learning in maybe high school or college. Like I learned the most from the classes that I enjoyed,
Yeah.
and I learned the least from the classes I didn't. And it's the
Hmm.
exact same for children. So if you're trying to force your child to do something that is not enjoyable for them, there's less opportunity for learning because they're going to be focused on like, oh my gosh, how can I escape from this thing that I really don't like?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of focusing on enjoying time with you. So I think for younger kids, or kids who need a little more support to be successful, it's going to be a lot of identifying what your child enjoys and identifying their strengths
Hmm.
and building from that.
Yeah. I just had this conversation with my husband. I think yesterday we talked about special interests.
Mhm.
I was watching a young adult talk about his special interests. He's on the spectrum, and I was telling my husband, like, that's what you've got to do. You've got to get in there with that special interest. Like, if they want to play trains all day, then you've got to get in there with that train and try to, weave in whatever you're trying to teach them into that, because that's when you're there, you've got that captive audience then, and that's where I think you're going to see them buy in more.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is, again, like a really good kind of about face from what traditionally
Mhm, mhm.
people have focused on when we're working on social skills, because um, I think that there used to be more of a focus on, okay, how can I make my child not play with trains anymore and play with
Ah,
different
yeah,
kinds of toys?
yeah.
And that's not where we're going to see the most growth,
Mhm,
because what we should be focusing on is, okay, if your child really enjoys trains, like you said,
mhm.
like lean into that, make
Yeah,
it all trains all the time, and use the
mhm.
trains to teach, the enthusiasm of trains to teach your child all sorts of other skills.
Right. That's great. Now, we've talked about children's social skills, were, who may be struggling, but even more so, I feel like, is our teenagers, because the teen years are so social, right? I mean,
Mhm.
they spend so much time and put so much value on their social relationships. How can parents teach these children? And I ask because I ask this because it's a valuable question, but also I have a friend who has two kiddos on the spectrum, one less impacted than the other, one more significantly impacted, and she's saying that these kids are so doing not as well in their
Yeah.
social interactions because they're not able to practice. They don't have that opportunity, and the younger one is not as interested anyway. So he's like, "Oh, great! I don't have to be around
Yeah.
people all day. This is wonderful." And I think a lot of our kids are kind of feeling that way. So, what can we do with our teenagers to help them in their social skills?
I think, the teenage years are obviously really challenging,
Hmm.
you know,
Anyway.
particularly, yeah, anyway, particularly during a pandemic,
Hmm.
particularly for people with social language
Yeah.
differences.
Yeah.
For me, with teens, but also with kids of all ages, I think it's really important to normalize feelings. Um,
Mhm.
I think in the past, and a lot of times, like, this is what happened in my family, was like, if you're sad, it was like, don't cry, that's not a big deal.
Yes.
Or don't feel mad, this
Yep.
isn't something to get mad about.
Yes.
Um, and I think sometimes we tell kids, like, your feelings not valid.
Mhm.
You don't need to cry because you didn't actually get hurt when you fell down.
Mhm.
um, but I think it's really important to normalize all these feelings, to teach children that it's okay to have complex and complicated feelings.
Wow.
Um, and to say, like, you know, it might be that, like, I don't understand why you're so upset right now, but it's okay to feel upset right now.
Mhm.
Um, and
That is.
so when we're talking about teens and tweens, I think we see kind of an uptick in these
Mhm.
complicated emotions.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
that's a really important part of it, is saying, like, it's okay to feel these emotions. It's okay to feel like you don't want to hang out with friends right now. It's okay to feel confused about how to make friends right now. It's okay to feel angry at me or at the world that you can't see your friends right now.
Mhm.
Um, and just and being vulnerable about our own feelings too, so we can kind of bring in that self-talk that we already talked about, and as adults talk about how we feel and how we manage our normal and complex emotions.
That's really
um
great. That's great. And I just want to add, putting a name on it. And this is what we've been
uh,
talking about with my younger child who has a lot of social anxiety and anxiety in general. And so we have like a picture, and she's young enough that we still have like pictures of different emotions, but a variety of emotions because maybe you're happy, but maybe you're ecstatic, or maybe you're sad, or you're depressed. And so being able to put a name to or a face to the different variety or spectrum of emotions, we've been seeing that be a little bit helpful for her.
yeah, exactly. And it's like you're saying, I think, we don't want to get focused on, like, just basic emotions, happy, sad, angry.
Mhm,
Um, I think even from a very young age, we can use complex emotional words, complex
mhm,
emotional language with children, and
mhm,
that will help them as they grow to be able to more easily identify their emotions and to figure out how to manage them. Um, so, when we talk out loud about, like, hard emotions too,
mhm,
shame and fear and
mm,
anger, things that frustration, annoyance, things that we try to hide from kids more traditionally.
Yeah.
Then it teaches our children it's okay to feel these feelings. It's normal to feel these feelings. I feel them, and I know you do too. And this is how I manage my feelings.
That's great. Yeah. And, I try to do that and foster that in our house. And I'll tell my kiddo, you've said that 10 times now. So now your sister is annoyed. And
Yeah.
so how do you think she feels? And so we do that like perspective taking. How do you think she feels now that you've said that for the 11th time? I think she's feeling annoyed. What can we do? What would be a better choice next time? Just calling it what it is, right? Because if we're trying to, hide and shelter kids, they're not going to grow, and they're going to be forced to experience these words and experiences outside of the home. So we might as well help prep them and practice inside the home. I feel like in a safe
Mhm.
environment. Um,
Yeah. And I feel
uh,
like, like you said, focusing on the feelings of others, but also helping the child focus on their own feelings too, and
yeah,
like realize
yeah.
their own feelings. Like, okay, why do you think you said that 11 times? Like maybe
Hmm.
there's some anxiety around whatever
Mm,
the topic is. So helping the
right.
child identify too, like what's going on internally, not just like what they're doing and how that's impacting others externally.
That's wonderful. Wow, making that connection, that can be so powerful. That's wonderful. You brought that up. So, boy, we could be here all day. This is amazing conversation here. If families, if you're watching and you just joined us, we're discussing supporting social skills in our children at home as we are supporting our children who have unique needs. And we have Dr. Catherine here who's giving us a wealth of information. And thank you so much again for being here, Dr. Catherine. Last thing, how can parents reach out to you if they're looking for support and assistance in this area and they want to learn more?
Yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody, answer questions that might have come up, answer other questions you have. I'm on Facebook and Instagram
Mhm.
at North Star SLPC. Um, and my website is northstarslpc.com. Or you can also email me hello@northstarslpc.com.
I love that name, North Star. Like you're pointing the way, you're shining the way to support families, right? So, thank you for being a guide along the journey for special needs families like my own. Um, so we appreciate your service to the community. Um, so I just want to wrap up for parents who maybe missed part of our discussion. Dr. Catherine discussed what social skills are and how these play out at home, how children interact with their peers, but then in the home environment, how they're interacting with their siblings and those social interactions in the home, as well with the family. We talked about some tips to help kiddos. We talked about goal setting and getting kids involved and getting their buy-in, as well as self-talk and normalizing feelings. And so if you have questions about any of these areas, feel free to contact Dr. Catherine. She gave her information and that'll be available here in the post. You can also contact myself as well, especially if you have any questions or concerns in the IEP process. I am your IEP and autism advocate, and I support families throughout California through the IEP process. So again, thank you for being with us on another episode of Thriving Special Families. I'm your host, Crystal Sanford, and thank you, Dr. Catherine.
Thank you.
And I hope you guys all have a wonderful and amazing day. Bye-bye.